Scorpio, come closer for a moment, because what you've been feeling lately carries more weight than it first appears. There is something in you that has been tightening quietly, not loud enough to explain, yet strong enough to shift your entire awareness. It rests in your chest, moves through your thoughts, lingers in your body like a current waiting to surge, steady and pressured. These past days seem to move in an unusual rhythm. You take steps forward, you reach, you try to create momentum, and still, something holds you right at the edge. It feels like standing in front of a door that almost opens, a moment that almost arrives, a shift that almost takes shape. And somewhere deep within, a quiet voice keeps asking, are you standing right before something big? Your intuition has grown sharper, even in silence. It shows itself in subtle signals, in the way your body reacts before logic forms, in that internal noise that feels dense rather than chaotic. It is not confusion, it is accumulation, energy gathering in a space that has quietly outgrown what it used to hold. A part of you may have tried to push through it, to move faster, to break past whatever feels stuck. Yet the more force you apply, the more you feel that invisible resistance pressing back, as if something deeper is guiding you to stay inside the tension rather than escape it. This is where the shift begins to reveal its true nature. April 5th does not come as something distant or unfamiliar. It feels like a point of activation, where everything you have been carrying beneath the surface starts to move at once. Every delay, every pause, every moment of being held back has been gathering, shaping something that is now ready to unfold. You are standing inside that space now, Scorpio. The space where pressure becomes direction, where stillness holds power, where something within you prepares to turn into motion. And as you stay with it, as you allow yourself to feel it fully, you begin to sense, this is not random. This is alignment forming from within. If this pressure has been building inside you, notice it. 888. There is a pattern here, and it runs deeper than the surface moments you remember. It shows up quietly, in the way you choose calm over truth, in the way your voice softens right when it needs to become clear. You tell yourself it keeps things balanced, that it protects what matters, but something in you feels the cost. You've learned how to read a room before you even enter it. You sense tension early, adjust your tone, reshape your words, sometimes even your needs, just to keep everything smooth. It becomes almost automatic, a silent agreement where you carry the weight so nothing around you breaks. And over time, this turns into a rhythm. You stay quiet when something feels off. You let things pass, even when they linger inside you. You choose what feels stable instead of what feels true. Each moment seems small on its own, easy to justify, easy to move past. Yet together, they begin to form a pattern that slowly pulls you away from yourself. This is where the shift starts to become clearer. The imbalance you've been feeling does not come from the outside world moving too fast or too unpredictably. It forms in the space where you keep adjusting, reshaping, bending, until your own center becomes harder to locate. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes with this. It's not loud, not dramatic, but it stays with you. A quiet heaviness that builds when your actions and your inner truth move in different directions. You keep things peaceful on the outside, yet inside, something feels paused, like energy waiting for permission to move. And that's where the delay begins to show up in your life. Opportunities take longer to land, decisions feel heavier than they should, momentum comes and goes without fully forming. It's not because something is blocking you externally, it's because your energy has been held in a constant state of adjustment. At some point, a realization begins to surface, subtle but undeniable. You haven't just been maintaining peace, you've been stepping away from your own position to do it. You've been choosing harmony in the room over alignment within yourself, and that shift changes everything. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. You begin to notice how often you pause your truth mid-sentence, how often you redirect your instincts before they fully form. And that awareness carries a certain weight, one that gently leads you toward a different kind of choice. And that choice begins to take shape as something shifts on April 5th. Something shifts on April 5th, and it happens from within before anything changes on the outside. It feels less like an event and more like a point of clarity, where the things you've been sensing finally settle into something you can no longer move around. The pressure you've been carrying begins to take shape, and suddenly you see it. You notice what feels off without needing to overthink it. The places where you once adjusted now feel heavier, more visible, almost impossible to soften or explain away. There is a quiet moment where you realize you've been holding too much that was never meant to stay in your hands. This is where the real shift begins, not in what happens to you, but in what you allow yourself to continue. The same situations appear, the same dynamics exist, yet something inside you responds differently, more still, more direct, more certain. You feel it in the way your body reacts. A pause that carries awareness instead of hesitation, a silence that feels grounded instead of suppressed. The need to keep everything smooth begins to loosen, and in its place, something steadier starts to rise. A sense of self that no longer wants to be negotiated. April 5th becomes the moment where continuing the old pattern feels heavier than changing it. You start to recognize how much energy has been spent maintaining balance that never truly included you. And once that recognition settles in, your choices begin to shift, even in the smallest ways. It may not look dramatic from the outside. There are no sudden declarations, no sharp turns, just subtle but powerful decisions forming beneath the surface. You begin to hold your position a little longer, speak a little clearer, stay present with what you feel instead of moving away from it. This is what activation actually feels like. It's not something arriving to transform your life in an instant. It's the moment you stop reshaping yourself to fit what you already know doesn't align. A decision forms, quiet but firm, and once it's there, it carries its own momentum. And from that point forward, something begins to open. Not because the world changes first, but because you are finally standing where you were meant to stand. And that's where the door starts to move. There was a time when you gave everything your effort could hold, and still the response felt distant. You reached out, you followed through, you stayed consistent, yet something never quite matched, like speaking into a space that echoed but never answered. It created a quiet tension, the kind that builds when movement exists without real alignment. You may remember how confusing that felt. The more you tried to make things work, the more it seemed like timing slipped, doors stayed half closed, and clarity remained just out of reach. It wasn't a lack of effort, it was a mismatch in where you were standing internally. And now, something begins to shift in a way that feels almost subtle at first. The moment you stop adjusting yourself and start holding your position, the external world responds differently. Messages come through with less delay, decisions feel cleaner, and opportunities begin to show up with a sense of direction. It's not louder, it's clearer. The noise fades, and what remains is a kind of response that feels direct, almost immediate. You notice how things that once required force now move with a different kind of ease, as if something finally clicked into place. This is where the realization deepens. You were never truly blocked in the way it once seemed. What you experienced was a misalignment, a subtle shift away from your own center that affected everything that came after. And as you return to that center, the path begins to recognize you again. You start to see it in small but undeniable ways. A reply arrives faster than expected. A conversation leads somewhere meaningful. An option appears that feels aligned without needing to be forced. These moments carry a quiet confirmation. You are now standing in a different, internal position. There's a lightness that comes with this, not because everything suddenly becomes easy, but because your energy flows without constant correction. You no longer spend yourself trying to maintain what doesn't hold you. Instead, what meets you now has a different quality. It meets you where you actually are. And as this opening continues, it begins to touch other areas of your life, especially the way you choose what holds value. There is a moment that begins to repeat itself, quiet but unmistakable. You find yourself standing in front of a choice that looks familiar on the surface. One path feels safe, predictable, already known, while the other carries a certain weight, a kind of truth that asks more from you. And this time, something in you pauses longer than usual. Before, the decision often leaned toward what kept things stable. You chose what felt manageable, what avoided risk, what allowed you to stay within a certain comfort that required less confrontation with yourself. It made sense in the moment. Yet over time, that pattern shaped the way energy moved around you. Now, as April 5th energy settles in, that same type of choice appears again, but it feels different in your body. The safe option feels heavier than it used to, almost dense, like it carries a quiet resistance. And the other option, the one that asks for clarity, for honesty, for a step forward, it feels sharper, more alive. This is where the shift becomes real. You begin to notice that money, opportunity, and movement respond less to how hard you try and more to how clearly you choose. It's subtle at first, almost easy to overlook, but once you feel it, it changes the way you see every decision. You might notice it in a simple situation. A message you've been hesitating to send, a direction you've been considering, a step you've been delaying because it feels unfamiliar. In that moment, your body already knows which one aligns. It carries a quiet certainty that doesn't need to be explained. And when you follow that feeling, even in a small way, something shifts almost immediately. The response comes back quicker, the interaction feels cleaner, the next step reveals itself without force. It's not dramatic, but it's precise, like a current finally moving in the right direction. This is where the deeper realization settles in. Money doesn't move toward effort alone, it responds to alignment within your decisions. Every time you choose from clarity instead of habit, you redirect the flow of what comes back to you. There is one moment, though, that stands out more than the rest. A choice that asks for a clear yes, without overthinking, without returning to the old pattern. And when you say it, when you stand inside that decision fully, you can feel something shift, not just externally, but within your sense of self. That yes carries weight. It moves energy, it changes timing, it opens a space that wasn't available before. And from that point on, decisions stop feeling like pressure. They begin to feel like direction. If you feel yourself making different choices lately, mark it. I choose alignment. And as these choices begin to reshape your path, you may start to notice something else adjusting quietly around you. Something begins to reorganize around you, and it shows up first in the way people respond. The same individuals, the same dynamics, yet their energy shifts, their tone changes, their presence feels different. It's subtle, but you can feel it. A quiet recalibration happening in real time. You may notice someone becoming more attentive, more open, or unexpectedly distant. Conversations carry a different weight, reactions arrive with a different timing, and what once felt predictable now feels slightly unfamiliar. It's not random, it reflects something in you that has already moved. This is where the deeper layer reveals itself. People respond to the version of you that you embody, not the one you remember. As you hold your position more clearly, as you stop adjusting in the same ways, they begin to meet a different frequency, one that asks for honesty, clarity, and presence. At the same time, something sharpens within you. Your intuition no longer feels scattered or clouded, it becomes direct, almost immediate. You sense what's aligned, and what's off without needing to analyze every detail. And that clarity creates a new kind of trust in yourself. You begin to hear your own inner voice without interference. It comes through cleanly, without the layers of doubt or overthinking that once softened it. And when you follow it, even in small ways, the results feel precise, like moving in sync with something deeper than logic. Then, almost without announcement, another layer begins to settle into place. Situations that once felt unfair start to shift, imbalances begin to correct themselves, and what seemed unresolved starts to find its own form of balance. It doesn't arrive loudly, it unfolds with a quiet certainty. Something that was taken, delayed, or misaligned begins to return in a different form. Not as a repetition of the past, but as a refined version that matches who you are now. And in that moment you realize, this isn't coincidence, it's correction. What makes this powerful is how all of it connects. The way people shift, the way your intuition sharpens, the way life begins to rebalance. None of these stand alone. They move together, like parts of a system that has been waiting for you to step into alignment so it could finally adjust. And as you witness this unfolding, piece by piece, something inside you becomes still in a different way. Not from pressure, but from recognition. You start to see the pattern as a whole, not just the moments within it. And from that place, a new understanding begins to form, one that carries you into what comes next. There is a quiet shift settling into you now, something steady, something that no longer needs to prove itself to be real. It doesn't rush, it doesn't push, it simply holds, like a center you can finally feel beneath everything else. And in that space, you begin to recognize how much has already moved. April 5th carries this energy in a way that feels internal before anything becomes visible outside. It marks a point where your direction no longer depends on external confirmation because something inside you has already aligned. What once felt uncertain now feels grounded, even if it's still unfolding. You may notice how your steps feel different. There is less hesitation in the way you move, less need to explain or justify what you sense is right. The energy that once scattered into overthinking now gathers into something more focused, more certain. This is where the deeper understanding lands. Nothing here arrives by accident, and nothing here asks you to become someone else. What's happening is quieter than that. You are returning to a position that has always been yours, one that simply waited for you to stand in it fully. Scorpio, this kind of alignment changes the way you experience everything. Balance begins to feel like something you live from, rather than something you search for. It shows up in how you choose, how you respond, how you carry yourself through moments that once would have pulled you in different directions. There is a strength in this that doesn't need to be loud. It's present in the way you hold your ground without tension, in the way your energy stays rooted, even as things around you continue to shift. And from that place, your path begins to feel less like something you chase, and more like something that meets you. What comes next builds from here, step by step, choice by choice. You walk forward with a sense of direction that doesn't need constant validation, because it's anchored in something deeper than circumstances. And that changes the pace of everything, allowing things to unfold with a kind of natural timing. So as this moment settles, you may feel a quiet acknowledgement within yourself. Not loud, not overwhelming, just a clear sense that something has clicked into place. And from here, every step carries that awareness forward, shaping a timeline that begins from within you. If this feels like your reset point, seal it. April 5th, I realign.